Okay. Hi everyone. I could see you at the beginning. Now I cannot, but at least I know you are somewhere there. Today I will talk about testing in context of IoT, and in a minute I will explain what IoT exactly is for those of you who have never experienced that thing. Okay, so what about me? I'm from Krakow, from Poland, and ideally I should be in Moscow now, but we all know what is the case. So nice to see you remotely. And currently I work for Brainy, and that's a learning platform. So actually a platform for students to gain knowledge, to find the answers. Maybe some of you, maybe those who have kids or younger, know that the platform. Yeah, and it's time to start. So what IoT exactly is? Well, let's define it as it's exactly in Wikipedia, for example. So IoT, which stands for Internet of Things, is exactly the same as the classical internet, just for physical devices. So what does it mean? We have a huge network of physical devices. They can connect, they can communicate between each other, they can exchange information, they can process data, and so on and so forth. So that's what you exactly know already, just for the physical devices. And I really like that picture, because that shows that those physical devices are not only separately working, but they can quite easily communicate and integrate with any platforms, with any services you well known. So this is that added part. We have the real device you can touch, you can feel, and that device or devices can autonomously making decisions, processing data, and so on. So the good example is that weight, or it can be your lighting system, it can be your vacuum cleaner, it can be actually whatever you imagine. And as far as I know, it was predicted that till 2025 there will be 25 billion of such devices, but it was like 2 years ago, that prediction, and now it's going to be even more. And there is a simple reason, because large companies like Motorola, like Samsung, like Ericsson, they entered IoT market as well. So not only high technological companies or startups entering that, but big players, they want to have a share of the market for themselves as well. So let's start with testing. Actually, I started having fun with because except for work, it's fun as well, and it's great fun. I started like 7 years ago testing IoT and embedded devices, and at the time it was super challenging. Actually, the desk is the real picture. After a couple of months I spent at the company, and at that moment I thought everything is needed for testing, but the more I will get into the field, the less I will need. However, it occurred 5 years later that I still need almost everything on a daily basis to test it. So that's a quick example. What is the major difference between testing software and hardware? You basically need a lot of stuff for your physical device, not just notebook and the screen. So a lot of, let's call it, dirty work. Okay, so at that time, it was at the beginning, I thought it's going to be fun and easy. And half of that sentence was true. So that was a great fun. However, it wasn't that easy as I expected. So what I want to share with you today is what I have learned for that over 5 years working in 3 different IoT and embedded companies. And for even if you don't work for such companies, I'm pretty sure you will find something useful for yourself, scaling it to web or mobile testing platforms. Okay, so let's start with risks and challenges. At first, I think that's what we know very well currently. So everyone wants to, everyone wants to have agile or make agile. Everyone wants to introduce DevOps approach, and that means we want to deliver everything continuously, more frequently, quicker, and so on. And that's a great approach that we want to decrease the time needed for deployment and so on. However, there is a problem, and that's probably what you faced already. So if we talk about testing, there are 2 terms. It's false positives and false negatives, which basically stands if it should be pass, I see fail, and vice versa. If it should be fail, I see it passed. And great visualization is here. What does it exactly mean? What is false positive and false negative? And that's surely the problem, but there's one good thing about those failures. They are deterministic. So whenever you repeat under the same conditions, you will always receive the same result. Even if it's wrong result, you will receive always the same result. However, there is something called flaky tests, and mostly for those of you who participate in test automation, it can be familiar. So that means nothing else that even if we have the same environment, the same conditions, once it can be success, and once it can be fail. And that's a problem because it's very hard to identify the root cause after all. But there's a small difference for hardware and for IoT devices than for software. So what are the real reasons? I have 2 categories here. The first one is environmental issues. So as you already know, we are talking about the real devices, about physical devices. So everything that can influence the physical device really matters. So if we talk about lighting system, then daylight or sun or maybe temperature matters a lot. If we talk about other devices, maybe it's humidity, maybe something else. And you cannot actually influence it too much because when it's hot, then it's hot, and you should work under that circumstances all the time. But at least that's something we know. And there is a second group, which I called accidental ones. And you have listed here. What does it mean, or what is my understanding on that? And unfortunately, that creates sometimes instability of your environment. But about it in a minute. Actually, that's exactly the same as for software. So whatever you implement, but you have 2 more groups that you should keep in mind as a reasons for flakiness or for instability. The second one relates. The second risk, the second challenge relates to updates. Now, when you think about web application and continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, well, actually, you can do it in a second or 2 seconds, or be like Amazon and deploying every, as far as I remember, 2 seconds. If there is something wrong, you can quite easily revert it. There is slightly more challenging. That's slightly more challenging for mobile apps because you have to release to store or to Google Play, and it has to pass review. So you can wait up to a couple of days to introduce the new version if the previous one was buggy. For desktop applications, well, sometimes it's more harmful for the user, because in worst case they have to remove the whole application and install this application again, potentially losing some data. But still, that's they can deal with it. There is a solution how to solve. What about our hardware? What about our IoT devices? Well, at first, when you update and there is something wrong, you can break the device. So it's called break, which means the device is fully not operable. You cannot basically do anything. So maybe you have faced that case. And the worst thing here is that usually there is no solution to fix it from the customer perspective or as a user. So the only solution here is to send your device back and receive the new one, which is not the best from the company reputation perspective. So there is, of course, a solution how to mitigate it. Ideally avoid, but avoiding is never possible. So mitigate as much as possible. The first one is continuous downgrade and upgrade, which totally makes sense because remember, it's physical device. So just imagine you have camera, you go for vacations, you disconnect your device, you get back after a month, and there is not just a single version to be updated, but there are like 4 or 5 new versions. So we have to keep compatibility between all of them, and very important to check it on a daily basis. The second one, small batches at start, which means like do not push update to all your devices or all devices on the market at once. And the third one, something else called backdoor solution. The first one is simply automation and continuous integration. One note here, you have to build your internal laboratory. Let's call it laboratory. Because you cannot use only cloud solutions. You have to have access to your device at any moment and communicate with it. So that's the biggest difference. You need to store it locally at your laboratory. Small batches at start, there are multiple solutions you may know. It's alpha, beta users, maybe early adopters, maybe trusted customers. Well, there is a variety of possibilities. And backdoor solutions is implementation based. So if there is a problem with wireless update, maybe that's possible to somehow do it manually. Or if we worry about losing data, just keep it as a separate partition and being able to always restore it. Well, that depends only on creativity of architects. The third one is about scale, and well, that's again something you may well know. Maybe you take part in performance testing. Maybe you have a lot of users and that influence your infrastructure. For IoT, there is slightly different issue because remember we talked about at the beginning. We talked about communicating devices between each other. And the problem here is if we allow them to communicate between each other, we can create huge traffic. Either usually it's wireless, so we create huge traffic in the air. And if we have like hundreds of devices trying to communicate between each other at the same time, well, usually we lose that connection. And a good example is it's Amsterdam Arena with, as far as I remember, 5,000 bulbs around the stadium, and they have to, and those are IoT devices that they communicate between each other wirelessly, but they do not send messages to every device. So the configuration here is the key. We cannot allow 5,000 devices to send packages at the same time. We have to do it in a reasonable way. And that's important to remember about it when testing. The first one is about thinking from the user perspective. So remember, it's a real device. So what can I actually do having this device in my hand? And I did that experiment by myself, just typed IoT device in Google Photos, then choose the first one. And as you see, it was Sonos speaker. But actually, what can go wrong here? Well, of course, there are buttons I can navigate, but what about turning on or off power at some point? Or what about disconnecting connection? Maybe disconnecting device from the router or router from the internet. What if we connect it back? Is the access to the internet back as well? Those scenarios are quite important because we take care about usability a lot. So just remember to test from the user perspective. Try to be as your user, to wear your customer's shoes. The fifth one stands for CXA, which means customer experience assurance, and always keep it on the first place when testing. Now, let me explain you. Just the company I worked for previously was doing cameras for pets, and as you can see here, there are two examples. The first one is communicating via diode with the user. So if it's yellow, probably it's working fine. Maybe if it's red, there is a problem with connection. And the second one, even more pictures, is about laser. So there was a laser in the camera to play with the cat. And now imagine laser is not working, so the customer knows the functionality is broken. So probably I have to send it back to the company, and I just have to receive the new one. But the problem is if that's working in a way that I don't really expect it. So if it's laggy, if it's not moving smoothly, then functionality, well, it's working from the functional perspective, but it's not usable at all because I'm getting frustrated, my cat is getting frustrated, and actually I know it's working as a functionality, but it's not working as I would like to. And here is the good example how they can influence your company. It's one of the influencers, one of cat influencers, making reviews of one of our devices, and that's Street Launcher. So you have cookies inside, and then it's thrown into the air, and you can feed your pet. And the problem was here not launcher not working at all. And the problem was that those treats, those cookies, were launched too fast. And the cat, every time it was launched, was scared. So after a few days, every time it was run, the cat was scared. And the review on the portal was slightly or gently speaking, not very positive. And you see, if it would be not working, then the customer knows, okay, there is something screwed up. I need to send it back and receive a new one. But if it's working, but not in the way as I expected, that's much worse in that terms. So is there any way to mitigate it? Well, of course there is. The first one, because we talk about product, which means we have product company, there should be a support. And building that communication channel and process for customer support and QA team can be crucial and very, very useful. The second one is crowd testing. So we can just check how it works for our target market. So, for example, in that context, it could be parents of all the pets that can test for us, of course, for money. And the third one is actually it's mentioned as Amazon, but for mobile app it could be Google Play or Apple Store. And having that comments, having that rates, we can easily extract what is not what the customers complain about. Because, like, people prefer to complain and to write negative feedbacks than positive ones. And why not to use it? We can quite easily extract that data, that information, and then understand what is the biggest problem for our user. Maybe it's connectivity. Maybe that's performance, or maybe that's speed, or maybe one of the functionalities. So having all those reviews, we get the huge number of information for free, and I really recommend you to use it because we have feedback from sometimes very frustrated customers, and they will tell you the truth. So the only point here is how to aggregate the data and then just use it. The sixth one is about about devices itself. So we have physical devices, so they work. They use some current, they use voltage. We have electricity here, so it's worth to remember to always use some kind of separation or isolation when you work with electricity. I probably twice or three times burned, let's say, few devices, including notebook and mobile phone, just because I didn't think, and I didn't even know at the time that that could be important. So if you will ever face such testing, it's good to keep in mind that, hey, I work with electricity. So it's good to remember about isolation. Even if you are not experienced, that's good to remember about it. And the seventh one is about using open source libraries or open source tools. And a lot of you probably use open source as well for software testing, maybe for mobile, maybe for desktop. But for hardware, it's even more visible. So the problem is that if something is not working, it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem with your environment or your device. Maybe there is something wrong with open source library implementation. And why I mention about it is because you can spend like weeks trying to investigate what's wrong with your environment. But at the same time, it's not your problem. It's because of open source you use. And actually, you cannot do too much with that. I mean, you can fix it and put your own pull request or just report it to the tool owner. But the most important is to not waste your time on investigating many weeks the problem that actually doesn't exist. And I faced it like a couple of times. And at the first time, it was exactly as mentioned. So I spent a lot of time trying to investigate where is the problem. But then, having in mind that it doesn't have to necessarily be my problem, it was much easier and much quicker to find the problem. Okay, but we said a lot about problems, about challenges, about risks. But even if you use all of those mitigation solutions, it should just happen. And I have two examples for you how harmful it can be. The first one relates to something I mentioned at the very beginning, about updates. And there was a company providing smart lockers for Airbnb. That's a great idea. So you don't, as a owner of the flat, you don't have to really talk to visitors. You just send them NFC code or Bluetooth or QR, whatever, and then that person just come to the door, putting the phone and enter the home. Simple and great. But the problem happened when they sent update to all of those devices, and there was something wrong, and all of those devices were bricked. So just imagine, you arrive to the place, you want to enter the home, but you cannot because the update happened like an hour ago, and something went wrong. So you just cannot enter, and the device is bricked, and that was very harmful for the company. I don't know what happened later, but I think that could be the last issue for that organization. And the second one, just to show you that it's not only like IoT is not only about hardware devices, but you have always the second endpoint. And here the problem was with pet feeder. So the idea is every couple of hours you feed your pet with the proper amount of food, and yep, that's it. That's the business logic behind. But it stopped working at some time. The problem was not with device itself, but with backend managing the scheduling of all those feeding processes. And in that terms, the CEO of the company said something, well, from my perspective, extremely funny, that he recommends to feed your pets manually, just to avoid starving. So, well, no risk, no fun. We have a lot of risks, but there is a lot of fun as well, and I'm going to mention about it now. So, at first, as you have seen, it's never just hardware. So you have a lot of behind you, because we talk about huge amount of data exchanging between devices or between device and end user. So we need to process the data, we need to store that data. So we need huge part of backend the solution with maintaining databases and so on. And of course, we have user part or user endpoint. And because we talk about wireless solutions, we talk about Internet of Things, just imagine, you have smart bands, you have vacuum cleaners, you have maybe smart bulbs. How many of you use web for that? 99% of user endpoint is mobile app. So you have, well, and it depends. It can be Android, it can be iOS. Usually it's just it. But in 99%, you have mobile app to control it. So as you see, there's a lot of testing on a mobile device side as well. So yeah, it's never just hardware. The second one is practical usage at home. So when I started, then I'm not working with IoT company anymore. But did it stop me from having fun and using and testing it on a daily basis? Not at all. So you have a lot of practical usage. You can have a lot of practical usage at home using Raspberry Pi or using Arduino. And here, the only barrier is your creativity. That's one of my favorite implementations. So the guy wanted, like, there was a cat going outside at some point and just getting back home. And the guy installed camera just to identify if the animal getting back to home is his or head cat. And it was pretty simple. There was a vision system processing, capturing the animal, and if the animal was proper, he just received the message in Slack to open the door. Very simple, but very smart. And as I said, the only barrier is your imagination. And this solution actually is very simple. This vision system is just I don't know, maybe 100 flag and process image. The third one, well, usually you work with just awesome home. You can have Amazon Alexa or Google or I forgot. Yeah, I think it's I forgot the name. With just different providers, but the same functionality as Google Alexa, and not Google but Amazon Alexa. You have beacons. You have everything actually connected with Internet of Things. So if you are a technology freak, if you like new technologies, and that's definitely for you. The fourth one, it's exciting real test cases, and I can give you an example of what does it mean. This is my parents' cat. Actually, you can see the barrel on the neck, and that barrel is yet another IoT thing. It's GPS, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi location tracker. So every time the cat is living outside and going like 2 kilometers from home, you can check if she's still alive, and just in case be well sure that there is nothing wrong with your animal. But getting back to those test cases, we of course always checked positive paths, positive scenarios for that. We tried some negative, so maybe disconnection, immediate disconnection, or what if launcher stuck. But there was one test case we didn't predict, and that became one of the biggest problems at the time. So the idea is when you call the device, you can launch the treat to the animal and just feed it. Simple, but we didn't expect that it can work too good. So when you launch it once, it was just rotating all the time, because there were signals triggering the launch all the time, and no one predicted it. So you see, it was very hard to predict and to find or to write a scenario at the beginning, but it's not impossible. So you need a lot of creativity just defining testing scenarios, test scenarios for that. Okay, you see a lot of cats. I have just one more. I promise, or meows. Just to give you an example, because we have a context of pets, just to give you an example how popular it is. That one is the application, let's call it Uber for pets. So you can rent a human just to go outside with your pet, and you pay like $20 for 30 minutes walk. So you pay someone, go out with your dog, and that's it. That's simple solution, simple idea, maybe not solution. But the issue here was that company raised 300 million from one of the founding rounds, being just the application to go out with your pets. So that shows how the market behaves. And yeah, that was the last one. So now time for key takeaways for everything I mentioned, for all those 7 points you have heard. So the first one, be aware of flaky tests. I love the, I think it's Google approach. They always keep test implementation, so every automated test case, they always treat it as flaky test, as unstable test. And then they run it like 10 or 100 times. And when under the same conditions, result is always the same, they add it to the test suite, but only after it passed their tests. So they have tests, they have to pass stability test. But at the beginning, they always treat it as flaky test. The second one is about updates. So yeah, that's the most fragile part for IoT devices, because in worst case, if there is something wrong with your update, you can break your device. So the device cannot operate anymore. The third one, scale, matters a lot. Just recall the example with Amsterdam Stadium Arena, but I can give you another example. So we had a demo for the customer, and we had I think like 100 devices only, because it was just proof of concept, but all of them were turned on. I mean, all the communications, so they could send the messages in the air. And as you can expect, there was a stability problem. So half of the devices were working, half of them just skipped the message because it was too messy in the air. The fourth one is testing real behavior of your user. So just think about just think from the user perspective. What can go wrong? And only that, it's really worth to prepare your end-to-end scenarios for testing. The fifth one is focusing on customer experience assurance. And as you remember, sometimes or even very often, functionality working not as expected can be more harmful for the organization than functionality not working at all. The sixth one is about having limited trust in open source, and that's not only for IoT, but that's at least my memory. So that's when I spent the most time trying to identify the problem that doesn't exist at our environment. And the seventh one, it's about, well, physics and electricity. So remember, if you have IoT, IoT is hardware. And if you have hardware, you need to accept that there is electricity and it behaves in a proper way. And the last one is just have fun, either by working at the organization, having the product, or maybe just for your own purpose. And then, of course, test it. Yeah, and that's it. Thanks a lot. Maybe we have questions, but I lost my Slido. Maybe someone from the organizers can help me.
The link had to be sent to your mail, maybe there.
Okay, just give me a second. Already having it. Okay, I see there are no questions. So thanks a lot, guys. If you have any afterwards, you can catch me via LinkedIn or Twitter. Yeah, and that's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.